So I'm going to take some risks at this point in the conference and at this point even in my life and say some things that I've never said publicly before. It's made even a little more complicated. It's being filmed, you know. And I didn't think of that when I thought I'd do this. But, you know, just one-shot deal, but this may not be a one-shot deal. So I may find myself editing myself as I go along, but in some sense I realize that I'm a very private person. And while I'm out there a lot and sharing myself with the world in ways that I am completely happy to do for the sake of the Dharma, at the same time, I feel like we all recognize that there are limits even to the best of our personal stories about who we are and where we're going. Okay? Because narrative is important, kind of understanding of who we are in a kind of conceptual way, and a storyline is, you know, important, but isn't it true that depending on the circumstances, you could tell the story 1,000 different ways? It'd still be called The Story of Me, starring me. And, you know, the Buddha is famous for saying that all his life of teaching could be encapsulated in one sentence. And I like to say that on the off chance that he wasn't just joking, maybe we should commit that sentence to memory. And it's, excuse me, and it's nothing is to be clung to as I, me, or mine. So the personal pronouns. But the operative verb is clinging, okay? So it's not to say that I'm not myself, but it is to say that I'm not who I think I am. Because no amount of thinking or storytelling can adequately capture the fullness of a human being. And there's a huge element of mystery to it. And I'm going to try to share some of that with you in a way that's going to be very personal. And I'm using the very personal, I wouldn't say very personal, but it's like, you know, personal. And but I'm sharing it with you so that in some sense you reflect on how this is true for you. Because the subject of this is lineage, transformation, and leadership in our collective engagement in bringing mindfulness-based work into the mainstream, into the world. Okay? And as I said in my talk on Wednesday, if you remember back that far, those of you who are here, this is really in the service of transforming the world. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a certain degree of urgency involved on every conceivable level. And just to say, for instance, that poverty is the most important factor in disease. Okay? And we work on this, and we work on that, and we work on risk factors and everything else about poverty. And lack of education are the biggest factors in disease. It's a gigantic public health problem, and there seems to be very little will to actually deal with that. I'm also framing this as this is the 30th anniversary, or the beginning of this year, as you heard Saki talk about yesterday, the 30th anniversary of the Stress Reduction Clinic. And it's all well and good to look back and say, wonderful, 30 years, pat ourselves on the back. But my aim here is to find some kind of vector within those 30 years by explaining some, and just light elements in a kind of impressionistic way, some of which I'll go through quite rapidly because of the time, but to find the vector of the future in the now. Okay? So that if we think about what might be, we are the agents of that. We are the agents of that. And we are miraculous beings, not just our patients. We are geniuses. We are the ones we've been waiting for. It's up to us. And it's not up to us to do somebody else's work on the planet, but it is up to us to know what our work is, what our longing is, what our job on with a capital J is on the planet. Another way I sometimes put it is what I would pay to do I love so much. Now, if you think back for a moment to Richie's talk, he ended on the theme of love. I mean, you heard a neuroscientist say that when it all comes down to, when you boil it all down, we're talking about love. If you had asked me that 30 years ago or even 20 years ago, I would have laughed it off. Because I had a certain kind of seriousness about like framing this in ways that didn't sound too airy-fairy. And maybe it's a sign of early dementia or late dementia. But as I said in the guided meditation this morning, for those of you who are there for it, I have come to see over the past 10 years or whatever, that the very act of taking our seat in the morning to sit, it's a radical act, and it's a radical act of love. A radical act of love and sanity and kindness and self-compassion. And so it's not like, well, I'm a meditator and that's what meditators are supposed to do, so I'll sit, or I just in the habit of sitting. It's good to not make sitting into a habit, but into a yes that you live over and over again, virtually moment by moment. Because it's never been about the sitting. It's about the awareness. There are many different doors into this room. And the important thing is not to stand in the doorway and claim it and plant the Portuguese flag or the Spanish flag or, the American flag and say, yes, this is the doorway. Because there are lots of doors into this room. And the important thing is to enter and stand in your own truth. And if you don't know what that is, so much the better. There's a certain arrogance of knowing or thinking you know. And there's a certain power in knowing that you don't know. And there's a certain blindness that we're all susceptible to when we don't even know what we don't know. And that will happen. It's inevitable. And how we treat ourselves when we discover that lots of what we thought was not the actual reality is very, very important.